Hello and welcome to the final lesson on energy systems. So we have the aerobic system today. Our learning outcomes are the following. So how does the aerobic system provide energy? What activities does the aerobic system work for? How much energy does it create in terms of yield and the recovery time? Okay, so aerobic energy system then. So oxygen provides the catalyst for this aerobic system because we're generating aerobic energy. The system by itself is primarily used during complete rest or low intensity long distance activities, and the energy duration can be 3 minutes or longer. So any activity that lasts 3 minutes or longer will use this energy system. It can produce ATP through either fat or carbohydrates. The aerobic system is split into 3 stages, so aerobic glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, and we will go into further detail in the next few slides. Stage 1 then, aerobic glycolysis. So this process is the same as anaerobic glycolysis, but occurs in the presence of oxygen. So lactic acid is not produced and pyruvic acid is converted into a compound called acetylcholine coenzyme A. Okay, that eventually moves to the mitochondria within the muscle cell while the remaining stages are activated. So as you can see on the right hand side, we've got glycogen converted into pyruvic acid. That's exactly the same process as the lactate system. So creating 2 ATP of energy. Okay, then pyruvic acid converted into acetylcholine coenzyme A because we have the presence of oxygen in this case. So it doesn't create lactic acid because we actually have oxygen to neutralize those hydrogen ions. So the main differences then, if you take a look at the lactate system on the left hand side, you can see we have anaerobic glycolysis, glycogen, glucose, pyruvic acid. Because there's insufficient oxygen, it leads to a buildup of lactic acid, that byproduct of lactic acid. Take a look on the right hand side, the aerobic system. Okay, we actually have aerobic glycolysis happening, okay, because we're using oxygen. Glycogen glucose creates pyruvic acid, but in this case, because we have sufficient oxygen, it creates acetylcholine coenzyme A. Stage 2 then. This is otherwise known as the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. Please try and refer to it as the Krebs cycle. So where the oxidized pyruvic acid combines with this coenzyme A, which came from that first stage, it enters the mitochondria, okay, and it's converted into citric acid, hence the citric acid cycle. During the Krebs cycle, we have carbon dioxide that is formed, hydrogen is split and removed, and enough energy is released to resynthesize 2 ATP. Okay, so the reaction produces 2 molecules of ATP as well as carbon dioxide. Hydrogen is taken to the electron transport chain. So as you can see in the image, we have acetylcholine coenzyme A, okay, that creates hydrogen, okay, it's split and removed. Carbon dioxide is also formed, that creates 2 ATP, okay, and that is the citric acid cycle. Okay, so stage 3, the electron transport chain. So this is where the hydrogen ion atoms removed during the Krebs cycle enter the electron transport chain. Okay, the hydrogen is carried to the chain by hydrogen carriers, and this occurs in the mitochondria. So the hydrogen splits into ions and electrons, and these are charged with potential energy. Okay, and this creates 34 ATP. So the yield of this system is 34. And that's because during aerobic glycolysis in stage 1, we create 2 ATP, but we do use that for that process. In the next stage, the Krebs cycle, again, we create 2 ATP, but we use that 2 ATP in the process, and we might lose ATP along the way. And in this final stage, we create 34 ATP. Okay, so, but we actually can hold on to that to use for energy. So there are 3 stages then to this aerobic system. The long-term energy system. So it occurs in the mitochondria, breaking down fat and carbs to produce energy. So the 3 main stages, that aerobic glycolysis in summary, converting carbs to pyruvic acid, but because we use oxygen, we require 10 chemical responses, producing 2 ATP molecules. Okay, and like I said, those are used in the process, so they won't be left at the end to use for energy. Krebs cycle, that takes place in the mitochondria, converting pyruvic acid into the citric acid, and that produces 2 ATP molecules and byproducts or waste products of CO2 and hydrogen. Okay, then we've got 2 ATP molecules again that are used in that process and will be used by tissues along the way. Finally, the electron transport chain. Okay, that is the most important, produce a majority of ATP, the 34 ATP from glucose, accepts that hydrogen to produce ATP in the presence of oxygen, creating that yield of 34 ATP in total. So have a think about the advantages and disadvantages. Our advantages are that a large amount of ATP is made in this system, so we can supply a long period of ATP, and there's no harmful byproducts. So just in regards to that, if we looked at the lactate system, there is a harmful byproduct, that's the lactic acid. In this case, there's no byproducts, no waste products. The disadvantage is you do need oxygen, so it can't make it immediately, and we do need the respiratory, the CV system to help with this system to catch up. We can't make ATP when at high intensities because oxygen can't be delivered in the same time to reach the muscle, so the anaerobic systems are used in those shorter durations. Recovery time. Replenishment of muscle and liver glycogen stores 24 to 48 hours. So this aerobic system takes 24 to 48 hours to recover. Obviously that is dependent on intensity and duration, so that's important to note. So any athlete that shows signs of fatigue will require longer to recover and replenish these stores. Have a go now at finishing this table now, the aerobic system. Our completed table should look as follows then. So the main points to note are ATP yield is 34. Okay, a good tip to remember all the yields of the system is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so 1 for the ATP-PC system, 2 for the lactate system, 34 created by the aerobic system. Right, so this activity or this system can last for activities ranging from 3 minutes or longer, and it does take a little bit longer to recover, so around 24 to 48 hours. Okay. So let's look at our learning outcomes again. Can you note how the aerobic system provides energy? What is the yield and what is the recovery time? Just as a finisher then, what do you now know? So try and answer these questions, pause the video, and once you have answered those questions, rate yourself. Are you rock solid? Do you need to reread or do you need to revise?